Right then, you're here, I'm here, so let's get going with this week's podcast because here's what I've got coming up for you. The one marketing habit that every MSP should obsess over, why every MSP needs a dispatcher, and my special guest reveals how to get vendors to pay for your marketing. Welcome to episode 334.
Powered by MSPMarketingEdge.com. Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
If there's one marketing habit that I wish every MSP would build into their regular rhythm, it's this: collect social proof. And not casually, I mean obsessively. Because nothing builds trust faster than a client telling the world that they're genuinely happy with you. You can talk about your service all day long, but the moment someone else says, "These people are amazing," the whole dynamic changes. So let's talk about why social proof works, the 3 types that every MSP should be collecting, and how to do it in a way that never ever feels awkward or forced. To understand why social proof is so powerful, you kind of need to look at a bit of basic human psychology. Back when humans were still figuring out fire and trying not to get eaten by dinosaurs, survival depended on sticking with the group. If the herd ran, you ran. And that instinct is still baked very deep within our brains and our kind of gut reactions. Even though we like to think of ourselves as rational, independent, modern decision makers, most people are still heavily influenced at an emotional level by what other people like them are doing. And that's why testimonials and reviews and case studies work so well. They quietly say, hey, people just like you trust a business like this. And that feels safe. So, as I said, there are 3 types of social proof that every MSP should be collecting, and the first is reviews. Reviews are the most powerful form of social proof because they live on third-party platforms that you don't control. So places like Google, they're public, they're credible, and that makes them so much harder to fake. And that's also why, if you have to prioritize, I'd always prioritize reviews over collecting testimonials. A simple and very effective tactic is to ask a client to leave you a Google review and then reuse that review in your own marketing. So you get it on the third-party platform, but you use it in your own website. So you could screenshot it and include it in proposals, or as I say, your site, or social posts, or even better than screenshotting it, get your website designer or any designer to recreate the review so that it looks consistent across different screen sizes while keeping the exact wording that you'd see on Google reviews. And there are, just out of interest, 3 great moments when you should ask for a review. During the first 90 days of working together, when everything still feels fresh and positive, just after you've completed a big project successfully, or right after you've saved them from something serious. The only real rule for this is don't ask for reviews if you're in the middle of any kind of difficult conversation with your client, which sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people forget or they don't realize that there's a bit of conflict going off at the same time we've sent them an email asking for a Google review. So that's reviews. The second type of social proof is testimonials. And testimonials are like a review, except you have control over them. That's what makes them different. So they come directly to you. And that might be as a quote or a video clip or an email that you've asked permission to reuse. And because you control them, they're easy to polish and deploy across all of your marketing. And yes, they do work, but they don't carry the same weight as a public review because everyone knows that you could have edited them. That said, one strong video testimonial, especially from a well-known local business or a business that's well-known in your vertical, that can be absolute gold. And then the third and final type of social proof is case studies. So if reviews are the match, case studies are the bonfire. That was the fire starting. A simple case study is simply a story that wraps social proof into a narrative. And our brains love stories because they feel more real, don't they? They're more believable and more memorable. The structure that makes case studies work is simple. First, you demonstrate relevance by showing that this client looks just like your ideal prospect. Then you describe the problem from the client's point of view and not a technical one at all. Then you poke the pain a little by explaining what that problem cost them or how it felt. You introduce the solution by explaining what you did. Again, don't drown it in tech. And then finally, you show the happy ending by demonstrating how the client was able to move forward successfully because of your help. And you can see why video works brilliantly here. Even a quick Teams recording can be enough, although it would be better to hire a proper videographer to film your client in real life. 20 to 30 minutes of footage gives you tons of videos that you can use across multiple platforms. And once you've got that, you can repurpose it into written content, LinkedIn clips, and website copy. One good case study can fuel your marketing for years because, of course, most ordinary business owners and managers are only looking for an MSP once every 5 years or so. So they're simply not seeing your case study more than once. And if you were to collect a new case study every couple of months, you can see why I say this should be a habit, because you genuinely cannot have too much social proof. So here's a simple challenge for you this week. Go and get one new piece of social proof, just one. Ask one client for a review, or record a 60-second testimonial over Teams, or even write up your first proper case study using that structure. You've already done the hard work of delighting your clients. Now let those clients help you prove it and attract even more of the right ones.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Hundreds of MSPs around the world have now got a free copy of my MSP marketing map. In fact, you can probably hear me unfolding it right now, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can actually see it in real life. It's quite a big one. It's a physical wall planner, and I'm going to send it to you in the mail so it can actually go on your wall, because it shows you a route to improve your marketing, including 36 smart marketing actions to take you from zero leads to new clients. And when I say this is free, it is genuinely free. Like, you don't pay the postage, you don't have to put in a credit card. I'm not going to try and get you to start a subscription, nothing like that, I promise. I absorb the cost of printing this wall planner and the cost of mailing it to you. And why would I do that? Because you never know. You and I might go on to do some business together down the line, or maybe we won't. And that's fine. I'm just happy to start a relationship with you. So if you want your free copy, just go to mspwallplanner.com, or if you're watching this on YouTube, scan the QR code that's on screen right now. At some point, every MSP reaches a stage where the biggest challenge is no longer technology, it's actually customer experience. Tickets are getting logged, work's getting done, but clients and the users working for the clients, they don't always feel heard or acknowledged, or there's a risk that they don't feel looked after. And that's usually the moment that an MSP realizes they don't just have a service desk problem, they actually have a customer service gap. And that's why I believe every MSP needs to hire a dispatcher. And yes, a dispatcher brings operational benefits, and we'll talk about those in a second. But the real magic of this role, I believe, is what it does for the client experience. Because a dispatcher's primary job is not fixing issues. It's owning the conversation with clients. It's making sure that every single person who reaches out feels seen, heard, and acknowledged. They want to feel that someone's taking responsibility, that they're not just shouting into the void. Imagine that you're one of your clients or one of the people that work for your clients, and you submit a ticket, and it's a kind of annoying problem. It's not a major problem, but it's something you'd really hope to get fixed in a few hours or so because it's just annoying you. And in most MSPs, you submit that request and you might get an auto response, but then you might not hear anything for a few hours, or you might get a bit of a message back, but it's just like a random update. It doesn't really tell you anything. Whereas when you've got a dispatcher, in that exact same scenario, every single ticket that gets submitted, the dispatcher phones that person. They literally pick up the phone and they call them, and they acknowledge the problem. They perhaps ask a couple of follow-up questions if necessary, and they empathize with the user. They'll say to them, they could use these exact words, I mean, this is a really annoying problem, isn't it? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get one of our senior technicians onto this straight away, and I hope to have an update for you in the next hour or so. And what the dispatcher has actually just done is they've bought your technicians some time to really look into that problem while also keeping the customer happy. This is great, right? From a customer's point of view, that matters far more than whether or not the ticket is resolved in 5 minutes or 55 minutes. When users know that there's a calm, organized, pleasant human being at the other end who understands what's going on, their anxiety just drops immediately. And you know, reassurance is a massive part of good IT support, isn't it? You must have learnt that so many times over your career. So Let's take a moment to just make sure that you and I understand exactly what I mean by a dispatcher. A dispatcher is the person who sits between the clients and the technicians, and their job is to make sure that every user feels heard and nothing ever gets lost, while ensuring that the technicians always know exactly what to work on next. So, from an internal point of view, a dispatcher typically works alongside the service desk manager, and they're not replacing that role at all. They're very much supporting it. They help to route tickets efficiently, making sure the right work goes to the right technician and that priorities are set properly instead of emotionally. Now, that alone massively improves flow and maximizes technician time. Because instead of technicians constantly checking queues and answering phones and responding to interruptions or trying to decide what do I work on next, what's the priority, they can just focus on actually resolving things. And here's the important commercial point: a dispatcher usually costs significantly less than a technician. So by hiring a dispatcher, often you'll free up enough technician capacity that you can delay or maybe even completely avoid having to hire another tech, which is another big win. But again, the real benefit shows up in how your clients feel. Every user gets acknowledged quickly and they know what's happening next. They're kept informed if there's an unexpected delay, and they're never left wondering whether anyone has even seen their tech support request. Over time, that builds trust and patience and dramatically reduces their frustration, even when things go wrong. One of the biggest mistakes MSPs make is assuming that the dispatcher has to be technical. They do not. In fact, some of the best dispatchers come from outside IT altogether. Just think about people who already thrive in fast paced, customer facing environments. Perhaps someone who's run a local coffee shop, or a hotel receptionist, or someone who's fronting a car service department. These are people who are really good at juggling priorities and managing expectations and staying calm under pressure. Oh, and communicating clearly and smiling while they do it. They know how to deal with people when they're stressed, impatient, or frustrated. Well, that's IT support, right? You can teach basic IT and systems people, you can teach processes, but it's almost impossible to teach someone empathy, organization, and great communication skills. I know these things can be developed, but it's easier to bring someone in who's got all of those things and teach them a bit of IT. And a great dispatcher brings all of those things to your MSP: empathy, organization, great communication skills. Wouldn't it be cool to have someone who is the friendly, consistent face of your service desk? Someone that clients recognize and trust. Everything gets easier. Technicians are protected, workflows better, and the clients feel better looked after. And you know what? As a side effect of this, your MSP starts to feel more professional, more controlled, and more scalable, both to you, your technicians, and your clients. I genuinely believe that a dispatcher is not just overhead, they're leverage. When you get this role right and you get the person right that's in that role, the improvement in customer service alone more than justifies the decision.
The MSP Marketing Edge. Member Update.
If you're a member of my MSP Marketing Edge B2B membership, don't forget that we're now hosting our community right within the portal. So we've got more than 700 non-competing MSPs all using the MSP Marketing Edge. And while our members-only Facebook group has been great for the last 9 years, we all know that Facebook is a bit toxic these days. So it's time to move our community over to the portal. You can access it right now just by choosing community in the portal on the left-hand navigation. And don't worry, we are committed to keeping the members-only Facebook group going for the rest of this year and next year as well. Now, if you're not yet a member of the MSP Marketing Edge, as I said, we only work with one per area, so you can check to see if your area is free. Just go to mspmarketingedge.com/membership and enter your postcode or your zip code. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also scan the QR code that's on screen right now.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Could you imagine getting vendors to pay for your MSP's marketing? Well, you don't need to imagine it. It's real, and it happens every day to MSPs across the world. There's hundreds of millions of dollars available in something called MDF, Marketing Development Funds, and yet very few MSPs are using it to subsidize their marketing. My special guest today runs a fast-growing MSP marketing agency, and she knows the good, the bad, and the ugly about MDF. So if you want to subsidize your marketing, here, right now, are the answers.
Hi, I'm Laura Johns, founder and CEO of the Business Growers, a marketing operations and lead generation company that serves managed services providers.
It's so cool to have you on the podcast finally, Laura. You and I met in real life for the first time,
I
didn't we, at
know, yeah.
ScaleCon in New Orleans last year, which you just told me that you only live a couple of hours away from. And we
Yep.
were on the naughty table with Nate Friedman, and I think Cassie from Tech Pro Marketing was,
That's
marketing
right.
was
That's
there as
right.
well. And
That's right.
I remember Nate kept whooping and hollering and throwing comments out. It was such fun, such fun. I
It
hope that
was fun.
ScaleCon happens again this year. It was. So it was
Yeah.
lovely to meet you. And
You as well.
what I want to get you on the show talking about today is, I know is one of your specialist subjects, which is MDF, Marketing Development Funds. And
Yep.
it's something we haven't actually mentioned in the podcast for a number of years, which is crazy because I know that there are tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars sat in vendors' bank accounts, which should actually be in MSPs' bank accounts. So that's what we're
Underutilized.
going to talk about.
Absolutely. Yep.
Exactly. So before we talk about that, do you want to just tell us a little bit about you? So what's your kind of
Sure.
journey within the MSP world, and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yes. I think that I can officially say I'm the only tech-focused marketing agency in the state of Mississippi. Although we do have a lot of budding tech companies that have come up in the last decade or so, we are not necessarily known for, our technology. So I'm really proud of that. I'm from the Deep South. I've always been in technology. Started my career working for a telecommunications company that was embedding cellular technology via AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile inside of an electric meter, so monitoring electricity through cellular, which was really progressive. And again, for Mississippi. So that was my first job out of college. Did graduate school, continued to work there for 10 years, which this day and age I hear is unheard of when you start a new career to stay somewhere for 10 years, but I loved it. And it was, that startup and that culture of startup was really, really a cool experience for me. And then that company actually sold for 100 million in 2014. And once they sold, I went to work for the parent company that was a meter manufacturing company in Washington. Then after that, went to work for a managed services provider. So stayed kind of in the industry and led marketing for them. And really, this MDF was a big part of my story even then. So at the time, the company I worked for was an AT&T reseller. They were reselling connectivity and other things through AT&T, and they were starting a program for partners that allowed them to get upwards of $10,000 and $15,000 a quarter based off of how much they were selling. And we were a very small, at the time, lean managed services provider business. And so that was my marketing budget. Essentially, I was having to figure out how to maximize those dollars so that I could, accomplish my own goals in the business. So from there, though, I went on to start my own marketing agency where after I saw a lot of problems that I was experiencing leading marketing there, tried to find a need for, which was coming around the whole managed services provider business with kind of a turnkey marketing offer so that they could focus on operating the business and then let somebody else handle these long sales cycles and staying on top of opportunities and things like that. So it's been kind of a journey, but all in telecom and all from the state of Mississippi, which has been kind of fun.
That's amazing. That's such a great story. So can you tell us let's assume everyone who's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, let's assume no prior knowledge. So just give us the sort of the 101 on MDF. So what exactly is it? What is it? What is it? And what isn't it? I think that's probably a good place to start.
That's perfect. Yes. Marketing development fund. So it looks different with different vendors. So I think that's kind of the first thing to know is that it's not a cut and dry. It's going to depend on their own systems. I do think that some are much better than others. I feel like sometimes it can be a catchphrase that brings people in to the vendor, but also gets really complicated in how to use it, which is, I think the statistic, now I don't know, so I don't, nobody, go look this up, but I believe that it's less than 10% utilization for this industry typically of the MDF that's available. I will get that statistic though, if it's true or not, but it's around.
Should we make it real? Should we make it a real stat? Let's just declare it now as a real stat.
This is my professional opinion, but I know, we know for a fact based on all of our clients that are using it, that they come to us and they say, I know I have MDF with X, Y, and Z vendor, and I've never used it. So then we start digging in and we realize, I think the reason that it's really underutilized is because it's complicated. And it's different for every vendor. So, but essentially it is in most cases and in the good ones, it is based on what you're selling in volume of that vendor, you achieve milestones that allow you to have cash in the bank for promoting their services. And that's kind of a big part of it too, is if you're selling a lot of different things, you have to be really careful in your messaging and your marketing on not making sure that you are service forward. Here's this voice, this phone or this, particular vendor that you're using, because then that can complicate the message a little bit. So I think that a lot of businesses, depending on their size, don't really want to lead with that brand. They want to lead with their brand. And that's where I think, again, it gets tricky. But getting compensation on a regular basis for selling more of that product, and the really good programs are doing it well. And it can be very motivating if you have somebody who manages it, which is kind of, become our specialty in supporting our clients and doing that.
Got it. So you seek MDF funding and then manage the relationship with the vendors on behalf of the MSPs. That's one of the things.
Yes, usually that's right. Usually when they come in, we're not going to go a lot of times go through the effort to find new MDF. We have a pretty good idea of, we'll do a vendor. One of the first things we do in onboarding is get a really good understanding of their services and their vendors. And then at that point, we have a good idea of what's worth, going after and what's not. And then so I would say probably 2 out of 10 times they're already using it to some capacity, but, may not be maximizing it. But yes, we will look at their kind of vendor list. We will start making contacts as their agency if they will allow us. If not, sometimes in some cases, which is understandable, the company has to be the one doing the outreach and making the connection. But for the most part, they're really good at kind of handing the reins over to us as their agency. And we're connecting with those marketing teams that are providing the communication and the guidelines around the MDF. And then our account managers are all trained on how to use it and strategy around it. It is strategic. You have to be very strategic, because if you've got 4 vendors that all give you MDF, you have to be giving them, making sure that you're qualifying for getting the money back in your bank account. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you said earlier that vendors that run a good MDF program, which obviously implies there are vendors that run a bad MDF program.
Yes,
so I'm going to ask you, just to make my life easy, don't mention the
I'm not
ones
going to
that do
say
a bad
names.
program.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
But you can name names if they do a good program. But what does a good So again, from the point of view of the MSP, what does a good program look like, and what does a bad program look like?
Yeah. I think just like a sales compensation, especially in this industry, it has to be simple. And if it's, if you confuse the person that's doing your sales, then you're not motivating them. And so I think that the good programs understand that if it's complicated and if it requires, 4 steps in 3 days and, multiple submissions and requirement of certain assets back and forth, that becomes complicated. Also, the bad programs are the ones that give a very, very small amount on the dollar. And I believe the ones that work best, and I am going to say one in particular, and if you look me up, you know that I'm a AT&T ecosystem partner. So our company is an approved marketing partner, which means 100% of the MDF that they give to their resellers is reimbursable with me because I'm an approved partner. But their program works well because they have 2 buckets. Essentially, if you sell up to this much, you get 10,000 every quarter. If you sell up to this threshold, you get 15,000 a quarter. It's not pennies for a dollar. It's not confusing. And if you sell these 2 thresholds, the next quarter you get the money. And so we have been able to build marketing activity around these budgets. And then also give the feedback back to the vendor. Hey, here's what happened with your dollars this year, that's what creates really good relationships that I think the vendors appreciate, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that's such a simple scheme, isn't it? If you sell more, we'll give you more, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I can see the simplicity of that. I can also understand how big corporations would overcomplicate things.
Complicate it. Yep.
Let's say it, Microsoft, right? And I'm not going to ask for your direct experience, but let's be honest. I'm not the greatest fan of Microsoft products, but even for me, obviously I have 365. Even for me as a 365 end user, just getting my invoice every month is so complicated. You have to log into a thing, you have to click at this. It seems to generate the invoice and take 60 seconds to do it. And it's like, oh my goodness, if it's like that, what? I know MSPs struggle with it. Anyway, so I could imagine
if you're busy too, like they don't have time for that. Yeah.
Exactly. And I can imagine they've got a ton of vice presidents all sitting in a room having arm wrestles about my priority. No, my priority. Right. And anyway, but so, yeah.
And I think to speak to that too, you said it, I didn't, but that is one of the ones that is just too much trouble. Yeah. But what I have seen in these programs or these vendors that work really well is even if they're, mega AT&T, obviously they're a very big organization. They, and a lot of people associate in their minds with AT&T complicated, because that, it's also a brand that can sometimes, however, they have a dedicated team just to partner resellers, and they have kind of two different divisions. One's a commission based, one's a top line revenue based, but they have these segments that serve a very particular customer with very particular outcomes and goals, and they
Yep.
understand what works for that customer. And I think if you try to take a big company, just for example, like Microsoft, and you try to blanket, a reseller program where we know that every MSP is different and has different, techniques and different systems in the way they sell, then I think that if you're not willing to take the time and invest the resources in finding what they need the most and having a support team around that, then you're not going to really be able to understand their needs and be the voice and be able to provide
Yeah.
a program that makes it worth their time.
Yeah, no,
You know.
that makes perfect sense. So I've got two final questions for you. The
Okay.
the second question I'm going to ask in a second is how would, as an MSP, how would you get started with this? Before I ask that
Yes.
question, we talked earlier about how these vendors come up with MDF funds. They put the money aside ultimately to sell product, and we all understand that, and that no one's got an issue with that. But where that
Mm-hmm.
is an issue, as you correctly identified earlier, is where they want you to push a particular kind of router or router, say,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you and I as marketers know that the
Yep.
end business owner or manager that we're trying to sell to doesn't care about the brand of the router. And
Right.
but if we say to the vendor, hey, we're going to spend your advertising dollar or your marketing dollars, and we're going to do a really cool campaign which is going to sell, we can bring on board some new clients, and then we're going to standardize, we're going to
Yep.
put your routers in all of their offices, but we're not
Yep.
going to mention your name. And there's going to be one vice president of sales that rubs their hands and goes, great. And then there'll be a vice president of marketing who says, but that doesn't meet my
Right.
quarterly
My
quota
agenda.
for
That's right.
brand
That's right.
mentions on Reddit or whatever.
That's
So
right.
so
That's right.
how do you is that a case of just working with vendors that get it and just finding that
Yep.
is going to be, I guess, 10-20%, or
Right.
is there another way of doing that?
I think so. I think, again, kind of, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but those successful programs are the ones that understand, hey, my logo doesn't have to be bigger than your logo. I can be a
Mm,
very small part of your overall plan. And if we're doing marketing well as a managed services provider business, we are talking all about outcomes. And we're talking all about our customers' pain points and their frustrations. And you're right, they don't care about the product. I feel like just in general, for another podcast, perhaps we talk about the fact that nobody cares about what you're selling. They just want you to solve their problems. So that's
yeah.
that's another topic. I'm sure you talked about that plenty. But I think that, again, these programs that get it, they also understand that you have a bigger objective that you're trying to meet. And so, for example, going back to that AT&T, if you put their partner badge on there, which is, small, and they want it a third of the size of yours, or they don't want it, they want you to be at the top, they want them to be at the bottom, those types of things, even working in, some MDF programs are fine with, even just like, for example, you're doing an email campaign, the powered by, this particular vendor, or, we're offering a 2 for 1, if you buy connectivity, you get 10 phones free, or, whatever. But being able to bundle products that are not both the vendor's product, and be open to the fact that, hey, if they can sell on outcomes and my product gets sold, maybe it's a small mention, but also, like, if I'm their vendor of choice, hopefully I trust the the MSP
Yeah.
enough to know that they're going to sell more, and figure. And again, kind of going back to that, how can this MDF serve them best so that they're going to be more motivated to sell my product? If you do it well, like a salesperson, incentivize them well, then the nuanced things, I get, we need to put a logo on there, but let's not require it to be the whole message, because if we're going to be, wasting time on sending emails about routers, then it's worthless,
Yeah,
in my
no, that
opinion
makes
anyway.
that makes that makes perfect sense. Final question then, which is where do you get started? So obviously, an agency like yours will
Yep.
will do this as part of your client management, but not every
Yep.
MSP can work with you. So is it as
Right.
simple as you talk to all of your account managers, you just ask the
Yes.
question, or it
Yes.
is? Okay, okay.
I would suggest, spending a day dedicated, or a week, a couple of appointments during the week. You're going to be talking to your account manager anyway. Go ahead and let them know today, hey, on our next call, or let's schedule a call if you don't have a regular routine, depending on how substantial of a part of your business that product or vendor is. Let them know you want to talk if they have MDF funds. Again, I would say you're going to find that a lot of them do. Um, a good way to practice, in my opinion, and of course I'm always smarter, not harder, is they usually, if they're got a good program, they can send you the guidelines and the breakdown of what you get for what, and go ahead and put that into your AI tool of choice and compare those programs yourself. Do some prompts about what might bring you the most value at this stage of your business with this many employees and this much revenue. Start to do some of that research and data yourself. Save yourself some time and look at what they're actually offering to see, is this a pennies on the dollar, or is this a lump sum based on my sales growth and what's going to work best for my business, and then figure those out. A lot of times, again, if it's not worth your time, it's not a good program, it's not worth your time. But there are some that are going to be good and substantial, and if you're not taking advantage of it, you're missing opportunities to influx some cash, because you think you don't have a marketing budget, but you might actually have a marketing budget, you just don't know.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Laura. Tell us finally just a little bit about your business, what you do with MSPs, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active, sharing lots of opinions. Some you may like, some you may not. And then also, you can look us up at thebusinessgrowers.com. We are, again, marketing operations, doing foundational marketing, getting you visible, digitally visible to your target customers and ideal customers. And then secondarily, we're doing lead generation for you as well once that good foundation is built. And I teach about it all the time. We've got YouTube, of course. If you go to the Business Growers on YouTube, you'll find us as well, and you can learn lots of things there.
Coming up next week.
Thank you for being here with me this week. Next week, we're going to talk about something that no MSP would ever turn down. What if there were a small number of relatively simple ways for you to drive a ton more qualified traffic to your website? Well, I've got some cracking ideas for you next week. See you then.
For MSPs around the world, the MSP Marketing Podcast with Paul Green.